Good day, dear students. In the previous class, you have come across the subaltern, or what we call as the subaltern, its origin, name of the name that is taken, and also the Indian scene. In the Indian scene, you will find that the people were, or the Indian Marxists were trying to uh, change the history or to write up an alternative history where the suppressed or the subaltern will be given prominence. It is in this connection you have a renowned name, and that is that of Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak, the diasporic Indian post colonial, post structuralist feminist theorist coming along with her view of the situation. She has much to speak of the Indian subaltern and also the people who had really fought for the subaltern, that is, the Marxist. And naturally, her theories were condensed into an essay form. So here, Spivak employs a post Marxist definition of the subaltern inspired by Derrida's deconstruction and takes into account women's lives and histories, because the earlier Marxist theorists were speaking for the subaltern and they had not specified either the women or even the other type of people. And so naturally, she pokes in and puts the issue of women before them. And though she totally agrees with the Marxist view, she has her own view that they have left out something. And so, naturally, she was inspired by Derrida's deconstruction, and thus she takes into account women's lives and their history, the history of women or the role of women in the freedom fighting movement, which was ignored by the earlier historiographers. Spivak uses the examples of the Muslim weavers in North India during the 1857 War of Independence, and she also uses the industrial action of jute workers in early 20th century Calcutta. Apart from these two, she also uses the example of the Oudh Peasant Rebellion of 1920. So these were significant struggles that contributed to the general independence struggle, which was totally ignored by the historiographers of India, and which the Marxist writers or the Marxist historiographers had really forgotten, and they had to take into account all these forgotten areas. So Spivak uses these examples and points out that all these are significant, and these significant revolutions or the actions of these workers also should be taken into consideration, because the weavers, the jute workers, and the peasants all belong to the group subaltern. Again, she takes the example of the muted subaltern from the historical fictions of Maheshwara Devi. I am sure that you are going to learn a lesson of Maheshwara Devi or a story of Maheshwara Devi in the next semester. But before that, Maheshwara Devi is a writer from Bengal, and she speaks of women, especially the marginalized type of women, and how the people or the society treated them. And it is through her writings, both of the short story variety and of the novel, that you get to know much about the subaltern. And Gayatri Spivak was much inspired by Maheshwara Devi, because Maheshwari Devi is writing not just a fiction from out of nowhere. She places her fictional characters in real life situations, in incidents which were already happened in her country and which the outside world had not ever come to know. And so Spivak takes on the stories of the muted subaltern from the fictions of Maheshwara Devi, because you get to know a lot about a forgotten or the muted subaltern from the fictional writings of Maheshwara Devi. But these are not just fiction, but just a reality which is just transformed to the fictional form. Otherwise, these are really true life stories. Maheshwara Devi's subaltern female protagonist, Jashoda, in The Breast Giver, challenges the assumptions prevalent in Western theories of feminism, because you can't measure another country, or especially a country like India, by the Western theories of feminism. Because uh, the main character Jashoda in the story, The Breast Giver, is actually a much less, or even shall we say, a Brahmin, but at the same time a marginalized Brahmin. And after the death of her husband, she was appointed by the Haldar to feed her, to feed his children, because she is employed as a wet nurse. And so she continues doing her job. And after some time, when the children are grown up, there is no children to feed, and she was pushed aside. And there is nothing uh, to equate the actions of Jashoda in the Western theories of feminism, and it just will not suit the Indian situation, because this is something that was there in India, and though the caste is also there, she was appointed in such a manner and she was cast aside. So the subaltern female protagonist, Jashoda, challenges the already existing assumptions of the Western theories of feminism. It is this this aspect of Maheshwara Devi's fiction that attracted Gayatri Spivak, and she points that there are people like that forgotten in the suburbs of the country and even the villages, but they are, their life is not brought forth by any history or by anything. And even the much revolutionized historiographers had not considered including them in the mainstream. So, her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak, which was published in the year 1985, becomes significant. Even now, Can the Subaltern Speak is actually taken as the essay which speaks for the subaltern, and the muted subaltern is given voice through that essay. The primary argument of the essay is like this. The first argument is that both colonial rulers and the sympathizers of the disenfranchised denied them the voice they need in any discourse. The second argument is that Western intellectuals like Foucault and Deleuze can silence them by claiming to represent and speak for their experience in the same way the benevolent colonists, the British in India, silenced the voice of the widow. So here we have two arguments in the essay. The that is the primary argument of the essay. One is that both colonial rulers and the sympathizers of the disenfranchised deny them the voice they need in any discourse. Both the colonial rulers and the sympathizers of the disenfranchised also do not give them any voice at all, because we have seen earlier in the subaltern, the beginning of subaltern, you find the Indian Marxists really asking for the inclusion of the subaltern in the mainstream. And so, in the Indian context, naturally, there is to be a representation. But even then, the women were not given much importance to in these discourses. Again, Western intellectuals like Foucault and Deleuze can also silence them by claiming to represent and speak for their experience in the same way the benevolent colonists, the British in India, silenced the voice of the widow. That is, the Western intellectuals speak for them, understand, speak for them, and it is not letting them speak. I hope you really do understand the difference. That is, you can speak about a person or about a group of people, and you continue speaking about them, but at the same time, you are not giving them a chance to speak for themselves. What they have to say may not be what you are saying about them. So it is that difference that she puts in here. And at the same way, she equates it to the benevolent colonist in the sense that the colonist who is actually much beneficial or benevolent towards the Indians, and they say that they are doing things to improve the condition of India. They had abolished sati, and they say that they did it for the good of the community or for the people, and they had really silenced the voice of the widow. They did not ask the widow whether she likes it or not. They did not ask the widow what her opinion regarding that is. Nothing done, but except do something without conferring to their likes or dislikes. It is these two arguments that that Gayatri Spivak examines in her essay "Can the Subaltern Speak?" And at the same time, you find that it also stresses uh, the gap between aesthetic and political representation. So the aesthetically presenting in the sense that it could be presented in the fiction, in the short stories, in the drama, and the political representation from the subaltern speaking for them and representing their cases before the world or even before the society. Spivak accuses the first world feminists and post colonial thinkers speaking for the third world women and or men, because Spivak is accusing. Why should she accuse? Because the first world feminists and post colonial thinkers, they really write about the third world women and or men in a sense that they are speaking for the third world. So Spivak is, why is she accusing them? Actually, it should be good because there is somebody to speak for them. And she says that they should not be speaking for them without consulting or without getting information from them, but actually they should be giving them a chance to speak for themselves. So she takes the example of Sadi, where the women forfeit her subjectivity and legal rights for becoming virtuous. You have also learned in the social studies how the observing Sadi is considered to be uh, a right of the woman or the widow, because we know that the sadi is the in the funeral pyre of the husband, the wife who is still alive will be jumping and will be committing this sadi. And you find that there are examples where the woman is quite unwilling to jump into the pyre, so she was dragged by the relatives to perform sati, because that is the way to become a virtuous woman in the eyes of the world. So this practice was prevalent in India, and with the coming of the British, this was abolished along with a lot of pressure from the freedom fighters, because they understood that this is not something that is acceptable to the modern society and also to the women in general. Sometimes they are compelled to do that, and even if they don't like it, the relatives just drag her and put her in the husband's pyre. Pyre means in the funeral pyre of the husband. So even if the woman really wants to live, she was not given a chance to live like a widow. This is why Gayatri Spivak is quite argumentative about that. The British had published something called Sati, and watch the spelling, it is written as Suttee, and it was in 1827. Both the Hindu and colonial texts deny women voice. So Sadi was actually abolished by the British, and both the Hindu and colonial texts deny women voice, because it is as per the Hindu text that the women, when she becomes a widow, when the husband dies, she is to commit sati, and that shows that she is virtuous, as if by jumping into the fire, she is proving to the world that she is virtuous, and otherwise she is not. If she just do not jump into the fire, she is not virtuous. Is that the way to regard a woman? So naturally these questions still linger. So the Hindu texts and the colonial texts deny women voice. The colonial texts, in the sense that when they set out to abolish sati, they did not ask the opinion of the women. On the other hand, they regarded it as a social evil and tried to abolish it all by themselves. And they wrote books and essays on that, and explained in detail about the savage practice of a woman being dragged alive into the funeral pyre of the husband. So it is too much for them. Maybe some women really do like to commit sati, but maybe some others may not. And so the option should be given to the women, rather than take it on themselves to abolish this practice, which is considered to be a social evil. Naturally it should be abolished, but the voice of the women also should be considered. Gayatri Spivak's narrative, the Rani of Sirmur, is another example of the feminist archival project that she proposes. So here, she is a person who just continues on with her agenda of bringing forth the subaltern, the mutant subaltern, to the forefront and making it a project and get details about it and let them speak for themselves. Only then will the revolution or the change will be complete. Otherwise, it will be like not considering these people and passing a law over them, or saying that all these are okay for them. And it is not in that manner that Gayatri Spivak wants the change to come. So when she writes about can the subaltern in her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? She vehemently argues that the subaltern really can speak, and do not make any rules or laws as if these people are muted, or as if they do not have a voice or they can't speak for themselves. Of course, they are for a long, long time they are the suppressed group, and they did not have a voice. But now that there is a chance, the voice should be recognized, and it should also be given due consideration. And it is that due consideration that she demands from the people. So here you find Gayatri Spivak coming up with a new project, and that is the Rani of Sirmur, and she regards it as an example of the feminist archival project, and she expect someone to take it up. You find another person, Dr. Susi Taru. She also undertakes a project of excavating historically denied Dalit and or women voices, Dalit voices or women voices, because it is a project worth researching on, because again, the denied voices of the Dalit or Dalit women could be heard from these most unexpected of places. And only when such projects really come up with a result that we know that so much had been denied to the people, and these voices had been muted for a long, long time. And it is time that they were brought forth and their voices were made to be heard by the people. Only then their their resurrection to, or even bring them back to the mainstream, will be complete. Otherwise, people speak about this subaltern as if they do not have any voice of their own, as if they can't speak, and continue speaking for them, for these people. It's not right, because they have a voice, and you should also have the mentality to listen to, or to make them speak and listen to their voices, and only then the change will be complete. And it is this kind of a change that she proposes through her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? So we have the topic, the subaltern, ending here. And we have seen how the word subaltern started with the officer in the British Army, and from that term, Gramsci had taken to mean the workers who were not united, and whose plight he explained in the prison notebooks. And from there, you come over to the Indian situation, where the Indian Marxists had really taken up the condition of the subaltern or those marginalized groups, and started speaking for them, and at the same time arguing for a history which was suppressed for a long time, a history which included the subaltern and their fight for freedom. And whether it is the colonizers or the Indian nationalist movement who had really put them to one side, should be brought, and a history based on their fighting spirit and their fight for freedom also should be included in the narrative. It is that which they propose. And again, you find Gayatri Spivak coming along the scene, agreeing with them totally, but at the same time pointing out certain things that they had not included in their narrative. And that is the condition of the groups, certain groups of people who had really contributed much to the freedom fight, and these workers also should be included. Along with that, the voice of the women from these margins should be brought forth, and their voice also should be heard. And it is not speaking for them, but letting them speak for themselves is that which matters. And so she proposes that that there is indeed a condition of these women as represented in Maheshwara Devi's narrative and fictional works, and those were existing conditions, something of a reality which was made into a fiction, and that reality should also be examined, and their voices also should be heard. And she proposes certain projects which is worth discovering, and it is those projects which should be taken up as a topic for research by the people who are really interested, and at the same time have uh, these people brought to the mainstream, so that their plight also should be understood by the people in India. They should not be put to one side, they should be brought to the mainstream, and their work for the country also should be highlighted, especially that of the denied Dalit or women voices. I hope you will have a good time reading through the Subaltern. And before we begin the next topic, and that is Dalit literature, and have a good day and continue reading those pages which I have told you earlier. That is pages 107, 8, 109, and also 110. Thank you.